もう一つお前に伝えなきゃならんことがある。ユミのことだ。
ええ、行方不明って。
それなんだが、ユミは
おやす。風間のおじき、てめえ、お前桐生。
桐生？
あ、
なんやお前、堂島の兄の次は風間か。何考えとんじゃ。
島野。
Yakuza KIWAMI was released worldwide on August 29th in 2017 for the PlayStation 4. KIWAMI had been previously released on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 in Japan in January of 2016. Keep in mind that Yakuza KIWAMI is a remake of the very first Yakuza game, which was originally released in Japan in December of 2005. KIWAMI was developed and published by Sega. The following footage was recorded on a PlayStation 4 Pro via an Elgato, so your personal experience may or may not differ from what you see. Yakuza KIWAMI begins a few years after Yakuza 0 with Kazuma Kiryu, now a lieutenant advisor to the Dojima family, which is incredible considering he ousted himself in Yakuza 0. Kiryu and Shinji go to a small office called Peace Finance to collect the 200 million they owe. After Kiryu roughs them up a bit, Kiryu and Shinji split up the 200 million, some going to the Dojima family and the rest going to Kiryu's adoptive father, Shintaro Kazuma, as part of his cut. The entire night, everyone reminds Kiryu of his rise through the ranks, all of them saying he's soon going to have his own family with his own army of men. As his adoptive father is giving him the good news that he will indeed have his own men and his own family, Kiryu gets a call from his best friend Nishikiyama that his love interest Yumi had been kidnapped by the head of the Dojima family. When Kiryu arrives, Nishikiyama had already killed Dojima, and Yumi had gone into psychological shock. Rather than take a moment, Kiryu immediately tells Nishikiyama to take Yumi to a safe place and that he will take the fall. Nishikiyama argues, but in the end, Kiryu goes to prison for a murder he did not commit to protect his closest friends. After 10 years, Kiryu is released from prison to see that the world around him has changed, and that he will soon find himself in the middle of a massive Yakuza internal feud regarding an empty position to lead the entire Tojo clan and a missing 10 billion yen. So if you've played the original Yakuza game back on PS2, the story for KIWAMI is essentially no different. The differences between KIWAMI and the original game on PS2 are more to connect KIWAMI and Yakuza 0 than anything else, and it looks like these differences did the game a favor. So Yakuza KIWAMI's story is simple and straightforward, but had more detail than your average game. It's nowhere near as complex as other Yakuza games that have like soap opera reveals left, right, and center. However, the amount of details in the story makes up for the lack of complexity. But overall, you'll come to notice that the game's story is pretty straightforward. Kiryu returns from prison to find himself in an internal feud with all the families of the Tojo clan, fighting to find the 10 billion yen. The person that finds the 10 billion yen takes the throne and leads the entire clan. Kiryu is never interested in the bigger picture. He's only focused on those around him and ends up falling dick first into the bigger problem. When he leaves prison, he knows that he has to help Kazuma, his adoptive father, but it turns out his dad is involved in the missing 10 billion yen. Kiryu is looking for his love interest, but he ends up finding a little girl that is related to her, that is supposedly the key to finding the 10 billion yen. This is a wonderful thing, because it simplifies the story by really highlighting the important players in the narrative, and it serves as a reminder as to why what's going on is going on. Remember in Payback, that movie where Mel Gibson literally takes down an entire criminal organization only because he wanted a $70,000 cut from like a robbery that he was involved in? And like when he's threatening like the head of the organization after he's literally killed everyone below him, the organization's head, like the head of the mafia, is like, how much do you want? And Mel Gibson is like, no, man, like I just want my cut. And then the head is like, you did all this for $70,000? That's basically Kiwami. He finds this little girl that could lead him to his love interest, and then suddenly he has to protect her against waves of enemies because she might be the key to the 10 billion yen. He doesn't care about the 10 billion, he just wants to find his love and help his dad. This not only puts the overall plot into constant perspective, but it also adds a lot of character to Kiryu. Kiryu is a man of ideals, which really makes him memorable when he's alongside everyone else who is the complete opposite. While he's looking for love among 10 billion, everyone else is looking for the 10 billion because it comes with power. While everyone else is reorganizing themselves and making alliances with shady folks, Kiryu is only allied with his dad because, well, it's his dad, and he wants to help the man who never forgot about him in prison. Kiwami also features some pretty great villains. Some of them are downright lame, with one of them just wanting power, another randomly coming out at the end and being a total douchebag, and one of them is just a random Chinese guy. But among these villains are two special villains that will stay with you after finishing Kiwami. The first of the two is Goro Majima, one of the characters you play as in Yakuza 0.
やっぱりごついでお前は。それでこそ桐生ちゃん。いや、まだまだ行くで。勝負はついた。遥かを返せ。アホ。死ねや桐生。親父。なんでキルちゃんはな、俺の獲物や。このこいつをやるのはわしだけなんじゃ。マジマ。
Batman is to the Joker as Kiryu is to Majima. Majima is all about strength, and to him Kiryu is the guy to beat. At one point, Majima takes a knife to the gut for Kiryu because, quote-unquote, Kiryu is his and no one else's. The other villain is Akira Nishikiyama, Kiryu's best friend. In Yakuza 0, he almost takes an antagonistic turn for the worst, but we later realize that it was more to protect Kiryu from harm than anything else. In this game, while Kiryu is in prison, Nishikiyama becomes a full-blown villain. The whole reason Kiryu took the fall for him was because he wanted Nishikiyama to be there for his dying sister. So while Kiryu was gone, Nishikiyama ended up having the family that was meant for Kiryu, and the original intention was to use his new powers to make a place for Kiryu when he came back from prison, and to have the financial resources to help save his sister. But as time goes on and flashbacks show, Nishikiyama is pushed to the brink enough times to the point where he molds into a totally different person and becoming the villain in Kiryu's story. These flashbacks are only in Kiwami and not in the original game, so those alone are a good reason to come back to this game. Also in Kiwami, his transformation is pretty simple and straightforward, but if you played Yakuza 0, this transformation is much more significant. In Yakuza 0, he's your best friend, and although his douchebag side shows, he's a good guy, and he really cares. In Kiwami, him caring becomes his weakness, and he thinks in order to be a better person, in his world, he has to lose that weakness. So if you've played Yakuza 0, the antagonist is actually way more impactful in this game. It's additional knowledge from Yakuza 0 that helps set up the world for Yakuza Kiwami, but that doesn't mean that you have to have played 0 specifically. Kiwami is still the first in the series, so you don't have to have played anything to understand anything going on in this game. It's all explained to you in this game. In the same way that the game benefits from its soap opera-like narrative, it also suffers. There will be an appropriate amount of suspense and just enough runarounds to keep you entertained just before a big reveal, but at the same time, it can also be so dramatic at times that it can lose its flair after a while for certain things, and yeah, it just becomes over dramatic. The audio is wonderful. The game is entirely spoken in Japanese, and although I can't understand a word that is being uttered, I can hear the emotion in the delivery.
何もできねえくせに偉そうな口聞くんじゃねえぞ。バカ野郎！てめえ、恩を後で返す気か。すいません、本当にすいません。この詫びは縁故でも詰めて。いらねえよ。てめえの子分すらろくにしつけられねえグズの指が一体何の役に立つって言うんだ。あ？すいません。すいません。すいません。
There is power behind certain declarations made from power-hungry Yakuza. There is sadness behind lines of acceptance. There is anger behind declarations of independence from both the protagonist and the antagonist. There isn't one character that sounded poorly in any way. The music is another high in the game's audio. Most of the game involves you beating up some pretty nasty dudes, and the music does a really great job at hyping you up for those fights, and even more so when you have to fight a boss character. Just the intro alone to the game before it goes into the main menu was enough to hype me up when I first popped in the disc. The music is never overbearing during the gameplay either, and you might not even remember or notice it if you don't care enough. But once you find yourself listening to it, you might actually find yourself enjoying it more than you should. The ambiance for the city of Kamurocho is there. The level of mastery for the city ambiance was reached way back in Yakuza 3, and it seems like they haven't really messed with it because it still sounds really good. The sounds of cars in the background and people walking past you, having their own conversations, really helps with the immersion of being some sick badass Yakuza man in the middle of Japan's Sin City. The same can be said for the sound effects. The game is mostly you fighting people, so it would really suck if your punches didn't sound like they were making an impact. And again, this was perfected way back with Yakuza 3 in 2009. There's no complaints to be made there. When you use a special move and you hear like the wham of your punch, a kick, your headbutt, or throw, you'll probably ask yourself like, there's no way he survived that. That I heard a crack. Okay, there's no way he survived that. The visuals are very much like Yakuza 0, with the obvious difference being that Yakuza 0 was in the 80s and this game is in the early 2000s. Besides the year difference though, everything and everyone looks the same. It's not necessarily a bad thing because all the good things I said about Yakuza 0 still hold up here as well. You know, you still get the small puddles reflecting the neon lights of Kamurocho, and the little details in the main characters' faces like moles, wrinkles, neck fat lines. They're all here. When there's a close-up in a cutscene, you'll notice little details that make no sense to be there. Like you'll think, wow, someone really took the time to add that little shine to that little tiny like pin on his suit. The same negatives from Yakuza 0 are here as well. Like you'll sometimes notice some baked in textures around the world, and you'll find yourself fighting millions of grunts with the same exact face. But at the very least, these little shortcomings don't get in the way of the experience. Anyone that matters has a very distinct face, and anyone that doesn't won't. But that's okay, because they don't matter. When it comes to gameplay, I'll repeat myself again. Sega mastered the gameplay back in Yakuza 3, and they've just been refining it ever since. If you've played any Yakuza game before KIWAMI, you'll be extremely familiar with this one, right off the bat. I would know since I transitioned without difficulty between Yakuza 0 and Yakuza KIWAMI, when I would record my LP for one and then capture my gameplay for the other right after each other. In Yakuza KIWAMI, you fight people. That's it. That's Yakuza. At the end of Yakuza 0, Kazuma Kiryu becomes the legendary Dragon of Dojima, and when you start off KIWAMI, he's been killing it. Like I said, he was meant to get his own family, but that was up until he took the rap for Nishiki, which landed him in prison for 10 years. So the beginning of KIWAMI has you with one skill set, which is the culmination of all three sets you had in 0. After being in prison for so long, you lose that legendary skill set and you have to start all over. So when the game officially starts after the prologue, you have the same skill sets that you did in Yakuza 0, which I think were great to begin with because they were a way to mix up the combat. If you want that legendary skill set and want to officially regain that title of Dragon of Dojima, you have to do certain things and earn those moves. One of my gripes with Yakuza 0 was the upgrading system where you had to literally invest in yourself. I hated that because there were other side quests that needed a lot of money, and by investing in myself, I had to stop myself from being able to finish certain side quests, but to finish those side quests successfully, I had to get stronger and I had to invest in myself. It was just like a vicious cycle. If I invested in myself, I couldn't do those side missions. If I wanted to do those side missions, I had to get stronger and invest in myself. In KIWAMI, they did away with that money system, and experience is once again the key to upgrading your abilities and learning new moves. Experience is gained by doing literally anything: drinking, fighting, eating, missions, side missions, playing games, etc. So now it's easier to upgrade your abilities without having to compromise your funds. While experience will help you upgrade your 3 different styles, they have no effect on your legendary Dragon of Dojima skill set. For that, you literally have to earn them by training with some legendary master and by fighting Majima. KIWAMI features a brand new system called Majima Everywhere. Majima will appear in random places at random times and will fight you. Fighting him is a little harder than random enemies, but the fight is usually well worth it because he unlocks certain moves for that skill set and he gives you a lot of experience. When he appears at a random venue, it depends how far you've progressed personally with Kiryu's stats or how far you are in the narrative. When he does, he has a little story to go along with it, so it's not just a random fight. You get a nice little mini game, nice little cutscene to go along with it. The Majima Everywhere system is a welcome little addition to a game that's already jam-packed with shit to do, and one more thing that keeps the game from getting stale. When I say jam-packed with shit to do, I do mean jam-packed. There are an insane amount of little mini games and side quests that will keep you entertained when you're not doing the main story missions. You can go bowling, drinking, eating, go mess around at a hostess club, go on dates with a hostess. You can play a weird kids card game. You can go racing with these little race cars. There is a side mission where you get alcohol for a drunk. There is a side mission where you go help a girl sell matches. There is a side mission where you fight a scam artist. And on top of that, there is an underground paradise where you can fight to the death in a coliseum or gamble it all away in a hidden casino. Side missions also have their own storylines, so don't expect to do one little thing for someone and then be done with it. For example, the girl that sells matches, her family is poor, and she's not only trying to help her family, but trying to save up for gifts for her lover. One or two objectives later, she finds out her lover was married, but in selling matches, she drummed up interest for her family's company and got them busy again. It's in the side missions like that that really make you think twice about the entirety of Yakuza. You can sense that someone put their heart and soul into even the little... Someone put their heart and soul into even the little things. Some of the downfalls of KIWAMI does include the ridiculous amount of people that will confront you while you're running around Kamurocho. But it's a Yakuza thing for people to fight you for the dumbest reason. You didn't say hi to me. Give me your money. But in KIWAMI, it felt like this was a little too frequent. And it became bothersome, especially during the later stages where the guys weren't a challenge anymore. So beating them up was just taking up time that I could have spent on something else. It got to the point where I was just like, alright, this is getting ridiculous. This might be a good thing, as it did help me put myself in Kiryu's shoes, because I know he was probably just as annoyed. I mean, who knows? But for whatever reason, it just felt like these encounters were a lot more frequent in KIWAMI than they were in literally any other Yakuza game. Also, the inclusion of guns in Yakuza has never been a high point. I don't know why they keep putting guns in these games. At the end of Yakuza KIWAMI, you have to fight 3 bosses at the same time, mind you, with ridiculous amounts of health and stamina, and they all have guns that will drain your health like crazy and knock you down. There was something similar in Yakuza 4, and I hated it then, and my feelings have not changed. Even before that dumbass boss fight, you have to fight a gauntlet of SWAT enemies with guns, and it's not fun for the sole simple reason that your fists are not as good as a gun. Throughout the game, you'll encounter enemies with weapons, and fighting 1 or 2 among a group of other enemies is always manageable, especially if you learn a legendary move that disarms those common enemies. But even then, that doesn't prepare you for 3 boss enemies with guns or a gauntlet of grunts with weapons. That whole bit at the end was just so frustrating that it's the only reason I'm not giving this game a perfect score. I don't care if it was in the original, it's really out of place and more difficult than it should be. I am not the greatest Yakuza player, but from the few videos I've seen of that part after I beat the game, it seems like everyone agrees that that part is just stupid, that it's just dumb. Yakuza KIWAMI is a wonderful game that exemplifies the idea that a series really can improve with each installment. KIWAMI also shows that there are such things as remasters and remakes that aren't just lazily produced to make a quick buck. BioShock and Batman Arkham City were great games when they were first released, but when they were remastered and re-released for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, there was literally no difference between the original and the remasters. And then you have games like Modern Warfare that looks astounding for a remastered PlayStation 3 game, and games like KIWAMI, which essentially blew the original game out of the water. There was a lot of hard work put into Yakuza KIWAMI, and it shows. Sega could have just as easily released an HD remaster to the West for the PlayStation 4 and then be done with it. Instead, they did so much more, and for that they should be applauded. Yakuza KIWAMI is a remake of the first ever Yakuza game, and therefore, players don't need to know anything about Yakuza to enjoy this game. For those that are fans of the series and played Yakuza 0, KIWAMI helps cement the foundations made in Yakuza 0 by making us care a little bit more for Kiryu and Nishikiyama. The story is fantastic, the audio and visuals are great, and the gameplay is nothing short of fun. Exactly like I said in my Yakuza 0 review, right after beating Yakuza KIWAMI, I dove right back into the game to really immerse myself into the world of Kamurocho and explore all the nooks and crannies that I might have missed my first time around. I bought this game at launch and I managed to snag myself a steelbook. For a new game that was released for only $30, I think it's definitely worth it. The game is worth it for $60, so for it to only be $30, I mean, hell yeah. Anyways, for me, Yakuza KIWAMI gets a 9 out of 10.
Anta.
俺は今日大変な一日でな。すこぶる機嫌が悪いんだ。運が悪かったんだよ。お前らは。
そう？運が悪いのはおっさんの方だよ。